Hey, Christine, thank you so much for coming on and doing this recording with me. I love it when I get to have quote unquote real people come on the show. So, why don't you just take a minute and tell everybody a little bit about yourself and a little bit of your story?
Sure. I'm Christine, and I've been working with you for 6 months now, I think. And I've been struggling with alcohol well, it became problematic, I should say, from 2014. And then I spent the next several years trying to be sober, doing it my own way. And, as we all know, you try to limit it to the weekends, you try to limit it to when you go out, you try all sorts of things, and it just doesn't really pan out that well because you're a master at tricking yourself into believing you can actually handle it. And then in 2017, it kind of started to become problematic. People around me started to point out to me that I was drinking too much, not necessarily peripheral people, but family, etc. And it led to a couple of stints in the hospital. I did a couple of detoxes. I did IOP. But again, it was very much, I felt that it was very much a outside world trying to control me. And I just continued it anyway. I was sober for 90 days, I was sober for 60 days. And every time a big event, or in my mind, a big event kind of threw me into screw this, I'm going to try to just go back to handling it myself. Then finally, in October 2019, I decided, mainly because I was put through an ultimatum, to go to rehab. And it was 30-day treatment. I hated the word rehab. I think has connotations. But anyway, I went. It was in October 19. And I went there and I actually ended up enjoying it a lot. It's very much getting you to surrender. And again, I had a very hard problem. I showed up very mentally or mindfully strong, saying, look, just hand me the solution. I understand what the problem is. I just need to fix this. What's the recipe? What do I need to do? And nobody could really do that, or I guess that's not how it works. So nobody handed me the recipe. So I went through the program, and they wouldn't get you the schedule a day ahead. And it just drove my control freak side mad. But I went with the program. I did it. I enjoyed it. I even got slightly spiritual. And I got out and I felt really good. The problem when you get out of a rehab or a program like that is that you've been completely isolated from the real world, but you go back to the world where basically all your problems or all the perceived problems exist. So you just get dumped right back into this whole world where that drove you to drink, so to speak, right? Now we can
Hmm.
all discuss what actually drives you to drink, but that's your perception. And I've spoken to a lot of people that come out of rehab that's the world, right? You go back into like nothing has happened, and your surroundings, whoever knows about your drinking or using, is kind of thinking, oh, now she's fixed, so
Hmm.
let's just go on with everything. It kind of starts with, you can move the alcohol away, which is fine. So people can do some sort of effort around you, but you essentially go back to your old environment, which I have a strong will. So for a long time, so I think I was sober 90 days, including the 30 days at Mountainside. So 60 days out in the real world sober by pure willpower,
Hmm.
because you can do it for a certain amount, right? Just like you
Hmm.
go on a diet or anything else. But then effectively you're gonna, find an opportunity, you're gonna get strong, you're gonna love life. Suddenly it doesn't seem that bad with a glass of wine. And one glass of wine isn't bad. The problem is you can't stay
Hmm.
at one glass of wine, right? So I would have one glass of wine and then I would feel fine the next day. I was like, good, this is fixed. It's not a problem anymore. And then inherently I would be back in the daily drinking routine, etc. So then finally, and my family was upset. My family's overseas. They didn't know what to do. My son, my 13-year-old, didn't want to be with me when I was drinking, which is totally fair. My partner, my ex-husband, and everybody was very worried and kind of at the end of the rope. So in May 2020, after the kind of pandemic started, I was isolating like we all do. Then something just clicked. I was lying in bed, and I was never very public about the fact that I was sober or trying to be sober with anybody. So I just isolated and went into my own bubble, hung out with my dog, Poor thing. She's been experiencing a lot, as they do. They are really the best friend of man or woman. And
Yes.
yeah, crazy. So one morning on May 1st, I woke up and couldn't really get out of bed because I was so sick. And I was so sick of being tired. I was so sick of being sick. I was just done. And for whatever reason, I've never listened to a podcast in my life. I heard all people doing it. It was so trendy and I didn't do it. And I don't even remember how I got onto your podcast, but I listened to your podcast. And finally, it was somebody that just called a horse a horse. Like, here's what you need to
Mhm.
do. And it was so refreshing. And I so remember it. So I think I must have listened to 20 podcasts those couple of days. I finally got good enough to kind of get out of bed. I took a long bath. And right before I got into the bath, I accidentally found a half bottle of wine hidden. And it was literally a split second. I have never poured out alcohol before. And I've never had to. Oh, well, I probably had to a lot of times, but I didn't. And it was really whether I leave it, and I was considering this. I was considering whether I leave it until after my bath or if I just pour it out immediately. And I literally poured it out immediately. It's probably the best decision I have made during my entire sobriety, probably my entire life. Because if I would have drank that, I know that I would not be sitting here today and I would certainly not be 6 months sober. And it was just a turning point. And it sounds very basic, very easy to most people, but it was really the turning point. And it comes back to something I've heard you talk about and a lot of other people. You have that 5 second rule where you're acting on instinct. And after 5 second or 10 second, whatever it is for different people, you start being manipulated by yourself, by your own brain, by whatever, you think about it. There's pros, there's cons, there's ups, there's downs. And in this case, I didn't have time. And I know for a fact that if would have had that bottle of wine sitting outside the bath, I would have been in the bath for about 2.5 minutes at
Mhm.
best. I ended
Yeah.
up having a 1 hour bath. I can't believe I ended up doing it. I was so relaxed. And so it's 6 months
That's
yesterday.
that's so crazy, and congratulations on 6 months. That's amazing. I really appreciate too that you said that you ended up liking rehab. This is I've been an interventionist for many, many years, right? Flying all over, doing interventions, taking people to treatment, and there is so much anxiety and fear around going to treatment and just walking in. I mean, it's a lot to think about, and it's a lot of unknown. You have no idea what it's going to be like, what's going to happen when you're there. Is it going to be awful? Are the people going to be awful? I mean, it's just a lot. And
Yeah.
I would say 98% of the time people end up really enjoying their rehab stay. It's so common that people say that, like, I was so scared to go. And then a lot of people have a lot of anxiety around leaving also because of exactly what you pointed out. It's like you get to go to treatment and be in this sort of cocoon where you're really safe. You don't have to make any major decisions, right? They kind of guide you, go here, do this, eat now, go to bed. You know, you don't have to make any major decisions. There's no stress. And then all of a sudden, when it's time for discharge, just like you said, you're walking back into all of your stressors, all of your triggers, all of your unhealthy relationships, right? Whether they're self created or not. But yeah, you're just walking right back into all of that stuff. And that really is the most important time to have some type of support. Yeah, I just appreciate that you said you ended up enjoying it, because that is, I think, an unknown fact in the treatment world is most people do really enjoy it. I mean, it ends up being a lot of fun. And you're surrounded by other people. We're so much alike as people with addiction. We're so much alike in our personalities and stuff. So of course rehab will end up being fun. I mean, I love being around other alcoholics and addicts. We're the funnest people. So yeah, of course you're going to have a good time.
No, and that's a great point that you make, because for me, who's been always very secretive, and I would say I still am, although I'm changing that a bit, but I had never spoken to anybody about drinking. I didn't think that other people existed like me. that had a problem. And then the other thing is, and I wasn't working the last year or so of my addiction or active addiction. And I was like, well, I can't go away 30 days. I mean, seriously? I wasn't going to go to Trader Joe's or Stop and Shop for a couple of days. I mean, seriously, that was literally the stint of it. And I could not possibly leave the world for 30 days. And I mean, it's just so created bumps in the road that are actually just in your brain because you actually can't accept the fact that you need it. I'm not
Yeah.
that bad. I'm not that bad. And then you go and you can speak to people. You can say, oh my God, I feel so bad today. People cried. And I remember when I came in, I literally thought they were just going to take me on a piece of string and slap me and all the pieces would break. And then they would assemble me and I would be, and I was like, I'm on day 2. I know this is what they're trying to do. They're just trying to break me because it was nothing. They couldn't give me a schedule. They couldn't answer my questions. I mean, I was just like, I could fix this place. I could run it much more efficiently. And there was obviously a whole, and then at some point I was like, wait, there's obviously a purpose with this. And clearly there was. So kudos
Yeah.
to them for managing to break me down. I didn't think that was possible. One of my arrogant streaks.
It's so funny. We are such control freaks though. I mean, you're
Uh,
exactly right. And I'm similar to you also in that I just really appreciate the solution, right? I don't
mm.
want to be caught up in the problem part of things because there's always going to be problems. Problems really are not that unique or fascinating or interesting. There's always going to be problems. Like I just want to get to the solution. How do I do it better? How do I fix it? How do I improve? All that kind of stuff. I love too that in your story of pouring out that wine, that truly is the epitome of the micro decision that I talk about in so many podcasts. It's that split second decision that will have such a major impact on everything that comes next. And just you making that choice that literally was probably 1 to 2 seconds, choosing to dump that wine put you on a whole different path than if you would have decided to keep it or drink it in that moment. It's all
It,
those little tiny decisions that are so, so huge.
it was absolutely mind changing. It was really, or game changing, I guess. It was just amazing. And I still can't believe I did it, but it was the right thing to do.
When you look back now that you have some clarity and some time sober, like when did you first realize you had a problem with alcohol?
I never had a problem, so to speak, that I had to drink to get rid of a hangover. I mean, I certainly drank when I was younger. I didn't start until I went to college, well, which I guess is normal. But I grew up in Europe where alcohol is quite, you can drink quite early. There's no limits to
Hmm.
get to alcohol, etc. So I remember going out in high school, buying a drink and then getting home. Like it wasn't, I never had that, oh, I need another drink. I need another drink. And when I went to college, people drink, obviously. I drank less, but still a fair amount, but not outside of the boundaries. I never drank when I was alone and or anything like that. And then I had a humongous personal event happen to me in college. It kind of started in 2012 and rolled into 13 and 14. And that's where I just was filled with so much feelings I've never felt before. Shame. Strayed from my moral compass. I did things that I'm not proud of. I lied.
Hmm.
And it was so overwhelming that the only way I could get rid of those feelings was drinking. And unfortunately, it is a very easy fix, right? You drink, and I
Hmm.
never did anything else. I've never been into drugs, probably because I'm a control freak. I just couldn't let
Hmm.
go of control. And I just, I realized that if I drank 30 minutes later, the problems became so much smaller, which is obviously not true. And I just had to, and every time those feelings surfaced, and it became more often as I realized what I had done, you have to work on that too. You have to work on everything, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't come free. And I realized that. So at the same time, as I was full of all this shame and guilt and everything I've done to people I loved, so I kind of had to drink all the time to not think about what a big thing that I did that I never thought I would be able to do. And wine and alcohol helped it for a long
Right.
time.
Right. Yeah. It became your coping mechanism.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it was just such an easy fix. And you think you get
Mhm.
away with, murder, but you just don't. There's a lot of people around you that know it. But it's also, people don't really want to stop you. Yeah, I mean, they do want to stop you, but people that don't know you that well are not going to tell you anything because that's not kosher, right? Or it's not
Yeah.
correct. It's just like you don't ask I mean, you just don't say, "Hey, can I help you?" Not that I would have been open for it. And
Mhm.
I'm very good at putting on a facade, act as if, and some people call me intimidating, or I think most people call me intimidating, but I don't do it on purpose. But because I have that kind of approach to things, people very rarely question me, which in this case worked out well
Mhm.
within the boundaries for me for a long time. But unfortunately, it also let me go on much longer than I should have before I dealt with it.
Yeah, those of us with really strong personalities, you're exactly right. There aren't a lot of people that are going to approach you and go, "Wow." It's, like I drank like a crazy person, but I didn't have a
Yeah.
single like friend going, "Hey, you might want to think about slowing down." I did when I lived in LA, but yeah, it's just a crazy, crazy thing. But you're right. People aren't really going to stand up to you. They're going to stop hanging out with you probably.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
I definitely had people that did not want to hang out because they didn't drink the way that I did. But yeah, but they weren't telling me to get help. So when you think about like when you started this journey in sobriety this time, what is your most significant sort of change from 6 months ago compared to now?
I think my life has become, and I'm not only speaking about from when I stopped drinking, but this is kind of even my entire life. I've always been check the mark and move on, drive to get to my achievement, tick off the box and move on to my next achievement. It's always been, I mean, call it the rat race for lack of a better word, not necessarily in work, but in everything. And this time, because of all the kind of methodologies, I mean, I've taken some of AA or some of AA kind of methodologies and ways of thinking, and from a lot of other sources. But I've become such a 360 person. I never would say something positive or try to turn something into a positive light before. And my motto basically, and I've said it a million times at work and in life, it's like, why would I point out the great things? They're good. We don't need to focus on those. Let's focus on what needs to be fixed, the bad things. So I've
Mhm.
always gone to the negativity, and I thought it was a cultural thing. I thought it was just a me thing, because here if you are at work and you get feedback, they say you're great, but right. I would never even say
Mhm.
you're great. I would always go, hey, here's the 5 slides in whatever we're working on that is not great. Here's the 5 Excel sheets that are not great. I would never say you did a great job and 90%. And I think that obviously came from my life, right? Or how I thought of things. And with myself being a perfectionist, like if I didn't deliver 110%, it wasn't delivered. And, if I look back, I did deliver it 110% all the time. And if I didn't, I would just work harder and harder and harder. And actually, this is the first time in my mind that I have failed something, which was a huge nut for me to crack, to get over. I
Mhm.
couldn't figure out why I couldn't solve it.
Mhm.
And that's why I tried so long for myself, because it was just an unknown to me. I have never, ever not solved a thing before in my mind.
Mhm.
Now, that may not be reality, but in my mind, I have always succeeded because I tried until I did. Now I kind of think about it, like even when my son says, oh, this bread isn't good, and I'm like, dude, it's bread. Like, let's try to be a little bit more positive. Let's have a positive spin on this vacation. Let's, like, I really try to do that. And it's so fascinating. If you told me this 2 years ago, I would have said you're full of bollocks. But the fact that if you think positive, it actually feels more positive. Like if you take the start in positivity, it actually becomes slightly less negative. I mean,
Yes.
it's such a simple thing, but God, it took me years to figure that out. And
Yeah.
now I have that in me. I'm just like, you know what? Let's sit down and look at it. Like I have a much more calmer approach to it. I'm very quick with words. I can hurt very well with words if I want to. But, I just take a step back and said, hey, what are we going to get out of that? Have a day fight when we're on vacation over the fact that nobody put the shoes on the right way? Like, it's not
Mhm.
important. So I think now, without the alcohol in my body, I've managed to be much more calm and collected, thoughtful, thinking about others, etc. I mean, and I've always loved helping others, but now I do volunteering, and I do things for other people, and it feels so great. It actually, I sometimes I think about my motive, because it makes me feel so good that, am I actually doing it for myself, or am I doing it for the people who actually need help? But I guess it
Yeah.
doesn't really matter, as long as you do it and everybody feels good. It's good.
Yeah, positivity and service both will absolutely change your life. There's no question. It changes your whole outlook on things. And I think a lot of that is that we just aren't as affected by negative things. When you feel pretty good and you feel pretty good in your life and you feel pretty good about yourself, the bread not being great is like, who cares? You know,
Yeah.
like it's such a minute thing. But I love that too, because it is nice to not be so attached to every single detail and have to like argue every detail or fight over every detail or be upset about every detail because it's exhausting. You know, it's nice to go, well, you know what? It's just bread, dude. Cool. Let's move on.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, if we need to get some new bread, we will. Who
Yeah.
knows? Whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, it's nice to just not be so attached to that stuff and to be able to let it go and not have to ruin your whole day over it.
Yeah. Exactly. It's really a blessing.
What is your, so you talked about service and positivity, which obviously are great, great things. What are some other things in your recovery recipe, like your regimen on a daily basis? What are some of the most important things that you think really play a huge role in keeping you sober?
I used to drink when I had the opportunity, which I think is the case, especially when you start kind of getting commentary from your surroundings. You start to hide it, right? Whether you do that on purpose, or you just kind of have a drink when you know they're not going to be home early, or your partner or your kids or whoever it is. And so you just kind of start to not show when you're drinking. You try to keep it within a limit where they can't tell whether you've drank a lot or a little, etc. So in some way you become manipulative about it. And I had to stop myself to be able to do that, if that makes sense. So I had to create the stick, because the carrot didn't really work that well on me. And I, like I said, I'm a control freak, so I couldn't have the fact that a lot of people I know have their car keys taken away, they have their wallet, the cash, credit cards, debit cards, bank ID, etc. And they tried, God bless them. And unfortunately, I'm very competitive in that sense, and it just became a way for me to outsmart the system. So, and I did, unfortunately, very well at one time. And I think it was probably right before May 1st. The same people just said, you know what? Here's your stuff, deal with it. And then it became upon me to be sober. And at the same time, I knew if I was alone, the willpower would run out. So I created basically security frames around me, boundaries, where I knew I wasn't going to be alone, or I decided I was going to drive my son somewhere at 4 p.m. because I wouldn't drink and drive with him in the car. And I didn't stay alone in the apartment. We have an apartment and a house, and I didn't stay alone in the apartment because that was a very big opportunity for me to drink before. So I basically set up those boundaries for myself, which was hard, but it was the best thing I could do. I wouldn't necessarily go to a bar with friends alone with nobody knowing I didn't drink. You don't have to tell the entire people. You just have one person that is with
Mhm.
you, and you say, look, I don't drink. If I decide to have a glass, say no. And then, so that's kind of all the time. In my kind of more tactical approach, I do a one call every day, pretty much. And it's from my rehab that actually has a call. And it's AA format, but you can, I don't know if crosstalk is the right word, but you can actually comment to other people, which I
Mhm.
really like. I have a problem with AA where you could just kind of vent and then you don't get any feedback. So I like that call where you can really, it's a recovery call, so you could talk about anything. They have a topic that you all discuss around. So that's been very helpful. Even if sometimes when I don't want to go on it, I go on it. It's my hour of kind of just thinking through the day, listening to people. There's always something that comes up, especially the days where you don't want to be on the call for whatever
Mhm.
reason. I listen to podcasts pretty much every day. One, I've started to, I don't like silence, which is one thing I'm working on, but I do my news from my home country in the morning just to kind of catch up. And then I try to stay off the news. And then I do one evening news because the world is so crazy right now. And then I do sober books on podcasts because, or on Audible, whatever. You can kind of take it with you. I listen
Mhm.
all when I go to the store, etc. So I kind of get the constant feeding. And I have to say with your podcast, because first I just kind of listen to the new one every week. But
Mhm.
then I realized there's so many topics that you just constantly need reminding about. So now
Mhm.
I kind of go back and I go and I listen to, one from last year or one from this year, like really what the topic is. So that's been really helpful because they're so kind of neat, packaged in a box with a bow on it. So if you are
Mhm.
thinking about relapse, which you should be thinking about prevention quite often, you just listen to that when you're at the grocery store or whatever. And it kind of helps you to just kind of have it sink in the back of your mind so that when things happen, you're kind of slightly prepared, because being not prepared is not a great strategy. Yeah, and when I do feel like I need to, or I mean, I don't necessarily feel that I want to drink, but I do sometimes feel like, oh my god, can this feeling just go away? It's funny because I don't miss being drunk or tipsy at all. I would hate to not be able to do everything I do now, but I miss the fact that it could just go away.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't use alcohol for it. But that halt, is it hungry, angry, lonely, tired? I mean,
Yes.
it fits 90% of the time. So if you just
Yes.
had that word, whether it's in your head or written on your car board or whatever dashboard, it just works all the time. Just think it through.
Mhm.
And and I used to be quite into, not eating bad food. And now, you know what? If you need candy, have a piece.
Mhm.
It's a lot better than have a bottle of wine. I mean, it
For
just
sure.
is. I know it may not sound like that to people that are newly sober, but I can tell you it is. So yeah, and then I started like new, I wouldn't call it hobbies because it's not all into it, but things that I would never try before, where I'm like, you know what, you try it, you don't like it, you know what, you can stop. It's like you just
Yes.
have to try it. So I started, I started beading. It ended up I made a lot of beads for the charity that I'm working at, and these people got all excited. So it was kind of ended up being a whole kind of process. I started running again. I used to be an avid runner, and now I actually feel like going running. And is it the endorphins that you get from it?
Mhm.
And it's just so nice. Like become a nicer person afterwards. And I've never kind of thought of running as that. For me, it was always an end, end to me to go, as opposed to actually just feeling great about it. And
Mhm.
I do horseback riding, which is you have to be very focused because I'm not very good. So you have to focus on the horse and you and what this person is saying the entire time, right? So it takes away everything else. You have to
Yeah.
be there, which I've always had a problem with. Even when in my earlier life, when we planned a vacation, well, the day we leave, I've been to that vacation 5 times in my head. And then
Mhm.
I'm just on to the next, unfortunately. And I would never, I mean, I would enjoy vacation because I do like beach and sun, but it wasn't like the same experience because I'd already been through it in my head 100 times.
Mhm.
So I try to do activities where I really have to stay in the moment. I try to keep commitments because the last couple of years I just never kept commitments. So that's been important for me. So when I say I'm going to be at the charity from 9 to 12 on Wednesdays, I am. If you can't do
Mhm.
during the week, I come during the weekend, etc. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I walk my dog a lot. I just kind of tend to stay active.
Yeah. That's a great list too, and there's a lot of things that we talk about, certainly I talk about in podcasts. What you were saying in creating, like, you were creating accountability for yourself, right? Like, not putting yourself in a position to be alone, and this is huge in recognizing early, recognize what those uncomfortable situations are going to be, because it is different for everybody. Our habits are different. Our rituals, our drinking rituals are different. So you have to figure out, what are those uncomfortable situations going to be in your life? Is it going to be, for some people, it's travel, right? Like, I work with a lot of high level executive people that travel a lot for their job, and airports are a huge trigger for them, or hotels. And if that's a struggle for you, you have to figure out how to create some accountability in that time so that you're not alone in it trying to fight through a craving, right? For some people, it's going to the grocery store and just seeing all the liquor there. I mean, it could be anything, but you have to create that accountability for yourself to keep yourself safe, you know?
Yeah. And one thing that I forgot actually, I've never been good to ask for help. I can't think of one time I've asked for help. I've always been on the top. I've had a lot of people that ask me for help about all sorts of things, but I've never asked for help. And anybody of my friends before now would say, "Oh my God, Christine would always be there and be able to help, etc., and sort out the situation." But what and as you know, in AA and sobriety, it's a very big thing to call somebody before you have your drink, before you relapse. And I just couldn't get over that fact. And I never called anybody when I wanted to relapse. Probably because I decided this is before now. When I relapsed, I didn't call anybody because I had made up my mind. The
Mhm.
minute I was on my way to the liquor store, I wanted that bottle. I wasn't going to call anybody to
Mhm.
try to convince me. But what I started to do, because I realized everybody speaks about it, so there's clearly something to it. So I started building a network with my friends from the daily calls, and I called them when I was feeling good. So I
Mhm.
just call, hey, I'm just on my way to the horseback riding. I'm just doing this. So I established a connection with them and the knowing about them so that when I did have crisis, I could call and I didn't have to spend 20 minutes to explaining the lay of the land. I could really just say,
Yes.
hey, I'm having a bad day. And that has been instrumental to me. And
Yes.
to the people that I do it with, they feel the same way with me. And we check in every day on text. I know that's another thing. It's just like, hey, how are you doing today? What are you up to? And it kind of creates this loose accountability internally as well. And you can know when somebody doesn't respond to a text for a couple hours, you know them well enough to know. You just say, hey, you okay? Whatever. And
Mhm.
especially in early sobriety, it's very important to have that. Not to nag on people, but to just say that. And you could just type back, okay, and you're fine. And that has been really instrumental to me to get through it.
Yeah, and this is something we work on in the 6-week program too, right? Is that you have to build those relationships and build that rapport with people when you feel good, because if you don't, it's the same thing if you're in 12 steps and you have a sponsor, or you have other people that go to your meetings or whatever, friends. If you don't call them when you feel good, I promise you, you're not going to call them when you feel bad. It's like you have
Yeah.
to create those friendships and those connections when things are great and you're really just chatting and being friends. You have to be friends first, or you're never going to make that call for help. And you're right. If you don't create that accountability, what you're doing is protecting your option to drink. Like
Yeah,
you said,
exactly.
once you were on your way to the liquor store, your mind was already made up. You weren't going to call somebody to talk you out of it because you wanted to protect your option to drink because that's what you decided to do. So yeah,
Exactly.
super smart though. All the things you're doing are super smart. And we talk in the 6-week program a lot too about having fun and kind of filling that time. I think this is a hugely overlooked topic, especially for people in early sobriety, is that you have to stay busy and it has to be with some things you enjoy, like
Yeah.
I don't always enjoy everything I do, right? I'm not always jumping for joy to go to every recovery meeting that I go to, but most of the things I do on a daily basis, I really enjoy and I look forward to doing, and I look forward to having those conversations. And you have to fill your time, right? It's like quitting drinking. The actual not drinking part takes seconds, like
Yeah,
don't take the
exactly.
next drink. But then I have all this open time with all these feelings that I'm not used to. And yes, you have to stay busy. You have to enjoy yourself, and you have to be willing to try some things maybe you've never tried before, because you're becoming a new person and you're changing, and you have to explore things that fit the new version of you.
Yeah. And also something that I felt like, and it happened every time, whether I relapsed or not, but like this after 7 days, when you kind of get out of the bad stuff, and then, so I call it after 7 to 14 days, you just become so overly energetic. I'm assuming it has something to do with the brain. But
Yeah.
I mean, I could not, I mean, in real life, I couldn't, or in past lives, I couldn't really sit down and relax because if I felt like I was wasting time. But when I started not drinking, so 14 days into it, I was like a maniac. I was doing everything. I was baking pies, I was cooking. And, but you know what? So what? You're using a
Yes.
couple of apples and some butter, and that's it. Do it. Do
Yeah.
it for your neighbor if you don't want to eat it all yourself.
Yep.
And, it's only going to last for so long. So I kept doing a lot. I mean, I was just letting myself be and doing that. And I probably didn't watch Netflix for, a month because I just couldn't sit still. But
Mhm.
I'd watched Netflix for 5 months before, day to night, so I didn't really need to catch up on anything. And then something else, I knew all the shows, so or at least I had watched them. I'm not sure,
Yeah.
I knew the storyline, but I've had them on. So, but also, I mean, I have a 13-year-old and a stepdaughter that is 11. But you could do this without kids too. And I just decided to dive deep in to holidays. So COVID obviously hasn't made, celebrations that much fun. But what I did was, so we went all out for 4th of July. I actually became a citizen a year ago. So we'd celebrated before, but I just decided this was going to be it. The kids loved it. And I mean, it lasts for a day, but you know what? You
Mhm.
go to the dollar store, you get some cheap stuff, you put it together, you do some flags. We did the same thing for Halloween. We flew on Halloween now, so we all dressed up in t-shirts. I mean, you should have seen the teenagers and my partner's faces. But I was like, no, we're doing this. We ended up having a great time. So it's
Mhm.
just like those silly things that I wouldn't have done before. And now I'm doing them because I'm doing this. And I mean, I just want to. I want to be silly. I want to be fun. We're
Yeah.
doing Thanksgiving now is coming up, Christmas or Hanukkah is coming up. I mean, we're just going to, enjoy it and decorate because you can't really do it with other people, especially the way it's going now. So you just have to
Mhm.
create the fun you want. And that's kind of the positive kind of attitude that I'm talking about that just eliminates a bit or limits the bad stuff. And if you're just going to sit and stare at the wall and think you're not going to drink, I could tell you're going to drink in like
For
however long,
sure. Yeah, you're
so
gonna lose that battle every time. And really,
yeah,
that's kind of the gist of life, right? Is that we create it. My
yeah,
life can be whatever I want it to be. I just have to put in the work to make it that way. And
yeah.
the easier and more fun that process is, and the more people I'm kind of doing it with to make it more fun, it's just easier that way.
Yeah, and we've been given this time now for COVID, good, bad, or indifferent. And I know it's very, very bad for the economy and people in general, and for me as well. But at the same time, it really allows you to think through what you want to do. It's been hard, I think, for a lot of people to work at home. I mean, nobody's going to see if you have a glass of wine or two at noon. But
Mhm.
so I think we're going to see more problems. But at the same time, you need to kind of break that and get out of the house, do buy a yoga mat or whatever it is. I mean, I haven't opened my yoga mat yet, but it's on my list and I have done the micro decision of getting it. So,
Mhm.
just things like that. You don't have to commit to world peace. You just have
Right.
to commit to, not buy a weapon or whatever. I mean, it's a bad
Right.
analogy, but so
But you're right. It's just taking the next step. Like, don't think too
Mm,
big picture. If you want a new job, don't think about, oh my God, networking and interviewing. Don't think about any of that. The next step is just look at your resume. Maybe it needs updating. Just do that. Right. It's a tiny thing like you buying the yoga mat. Who cares that you haven't opened it yet? Now that you have it, you're more apt to open it, right? Rather than just sitting around and thinking about it forever and not doing anything. So, yeah, just do the next little tiny thing, and that gets you closer to the big thing. Last question, favorite question. What's your favorite thing about being a sober person?
my favorite thing is that I have learned that you can take what you want and leave the rest behind. Because before, I was always like, well, you have to go to 90 and 90 if you do the AA thing, or you have to get up and do 5 meditations a day, or you have to do yoga. So those three things are my worst things, right? But what I've learned is I can literally do exactly the amount that I want and that I need, and I can leave all the rest. And even when you get advice from people, you can listen. You don't have to take any thing to heart of what they say. You just
Yeah.
listen, you hang up and you say, okay, that didn't work. I'm going to call somebody else. But you have to listen. You have to take it
Yep.
in and give yourself the chance. It's okay to eat the pizza and leave the crust. And it's even okay
Mhm.
to eat the crust and leave the pizza. But
Mhm.
as long as you do what feels right to you, it's okay to skip a meeting. Just don't skip it every day. You just
Yeah.
have to keep yourself accountable and keep yourself in the realm. And as long as you do that, you can have a happy sobriety. And I think that's important because, when you hear it, oh, you can never have another drink in your life. Well, that's probably not the way you should start out. You just don't have to drink today. That's really all you
Yeah.
have to do. And
Yeah.
then you wake up the next day, you can decide again. You get to decide 100 million times if that
Yeah.
is what you're inclined to. Some people are very rigid, and for them, they know they're never going to drink in their life. My real mind knows that I'm never going to drink again, but I don't have to convince myself about that. I'm like
No.
this, willy nilly, and I could decide whatever I want because that makes me feel like I'm in control. Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if I do have that pop up, then I need to just call somebody and control it with my other tools.
Yeah. And I had to break it down even smaller than that too. I did a whole podcast episode about one day at a time. I had to do 10 minutes at a time, right? There were a lot of
Oh,
moments I was
yeah.
10 minutes at a time and not always like making the decision to not drink again. I had to just decide to not have one drink. And
Mm,
when I was really early in sobriety, somebody said in an AA meeting, somebody said, when you get hit by a train, it's not the caboose that kills you. And I absolutely loved that because I was like, oh my gosh, it's the first car. For me, it's the first drink. I don't
yeah.
have to struggle with not having 100 drinks, right? All I have to do is not have one. Like that's
Yeah.
all, and
Yeah.
like it made it small enough that it felt easier in the beginning. I was like, yeah, I just have to avoid one drink. That's all. That's all I have to not have is one. Just as long as I don't have the first one, I'm good to go.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Christine, thank you again for coming on and doing this with me. I love your 6 months has been so amazing. And I'm so grateful I've gotten to be a part of it. And your commitment really has been unbelievable. And especially when you talk about like one of the turnoffs for you of going to 12 steps was 90 meetings in 90 days. But honestly, like how many meetings do you think you've done? Because I'm pretty sure you do at least a meeting a day, and sometimes you do multiple.
Yeah, for sure. No, I do. I've done, and the other thing, I haven't done the steps, but I've been to
Hmm.
step meetings where we discuss the steps. Now, it's really just a metaphor for me to not committing to doing the steps. Once I'm ready, I will commit to it. But,
Hmm.
I've discussed them. I know what they mean. I didn't want to say, oh my God, I'm going to do all the steps. But, I wanted to see what it was. And, never say never. I mean, that's always
Right.
been my policy, but I just didn't know it was going to apply to this, right?
Right. And
So
you're
yeah.
exactly right. You don't have to love every single detail of anything, right? Nothing is ever 100% exactly the way I want it. And recovery and AA and every other group is the same way. You're never
Yeah.
going to like 100% of how they do things. And the other great point you made is people are going to give you their opinions. There's
Mm,
no doubt. People in the room, but they're doing it out of love. That's why I did that. I did
mm,
an episode a long time ago called The Absolute Truth of AA. And you have to remember people are sharing their opinions with you because they care. They're telling you do 90 meetings in 90 days because they want you to be successful. Nobody's doing it because they want to shame you or criticize you. And as good little alcoholics, we love to put a negative twist on everything, right? And make it a personal attack of some sort. But it really isn't. People are going to give you their opinions. And many of our opinions are going to be different
yeah.
because it works differently for each of us, right? And how I tell you to do things, maybe you like 80% of that and you get another 20 or 30% you like from somebody else. They are just opinions and they are just based on our experience and what worked for us. And of course, we're going to share those things because we want you to do well. But that's
Yeah.
all, it all comes from a place of love.
Yeah. And I always say you have to create your own unicorn. And you really do.
Yes.
It's Christine plan one and plan 1A and plan 1B. I hope I'm on the plan F now, as I always call my file, plan final. But you have to, and I mean, if you relapse, you do get stronger. You do learn, but you have to be
Yes.
willing to learn, and you have to stop the train as soon as you can.
Yeah.
But
Well, and
you do,
you have to be willing to make adjustments also.
yes,
And I feel like this is where I see people struggle and kind of just, have hit the same bump in the road over and over and over again. It's like if you relapse,
mm,
that is an indicator that what you were doing was not working. And you have to readjust, and you're going to have to add some things and probably take away some things and whatever, but you have to be willing to do that to be
yeah,
successful in your next go around. You can't try it the same way over and over again and relapse over and over again, because that way obviously is not working, or you wouldn't be relapsing.
yeah, no, for sure.
Well, thank you again. I will link all the regular stuff in the show notes for everybody out there. Make sure you join us in the Facebook group and all that good stuff. And thank you, Christine.
Well, thank you. Have a great day.